Who is the author you have read the most books from? Stephen King. Rick Riordan. He made the Percy Jackson series and all of those. I love those books. Rick Riordan is the Ya King. Brandon Sanderson. The Cosmere is truly amazing. Journey Before Destination. Probably James Patterson while in prison. They're the most sought-after books in lockup due to quick chapters and thrills. Getting the whole Alex Cross story was like collecting every Pokemon. I saw a fight break out because someone was found to be hoarding them in his cell. But I also found Michael Crichton there, which was less sought after and gave me a love for reading. Also, romance novels are huge there for the spank-bank material. Or at least this was the reading culture in 2002 prisons. I also think James Patterson is the author first have read the most. This post has me thinking about how I can donate books to prisons. Haruki Murakami. J.K. Rowling Tears of Joy. R.L. Stine. I think more than 50, if not 60, including his autobiography. Michael Crichton. My older brother borrowed Sphere from the library and I read a couple of pages randomly to see what it's about. I didn't realize how much time had gone by because I was hooked instantly. Once I finished, I checked out Jurassic Park and couldn't put it down either. I had to read all his work after that. Neil Gaiman. Vonnegut. Dr. Seuss. Lee Child, Clive Cussler and Michael Connelly, all above 25, maybe 30. Just got into Jack Reacher books recently, because of the movie really, and figured why are there so many, must be good. I absolutely love them. Shame I put off reading them until now. Think I'm on book 5 now. I listen to them on my commute. John Grisham. I think the law is neat, so I have loved all his books. But he is an amazing author. I have even loved his non-law books. A Painted House is one of my favorite novels by him, and it's about 1950s cotton farmers. Robert Jordan, probably. I would say the same, and I've probably read more words written from RJ, but I don't think I've read as many books. The Dresden Files alone is already longer than what by book count. Probably not word count though. Then there's Malazan. Then there's all these books by Margaret Weiss. And Neil Gaiman. Robert A. Heinlein. Tie between Judy Blume or Beverly Cleary. We had to read all of them in school. Dear Mr. Henshaw has such a quiet beauty about it, definitely one of my favorites. In my mid-20s I really got into Philip K. Dick and read over 20 of his novels and a bunch of short stories. I wouldn't say all of them were that great, but they kept me interested. So in your 20s you really got into Dick, even though not everyone left you satisfied? It's a tie between John Steinbeck and Charles Dickens. Steinbeck is my favorite writer and I've been trying to slowly read more of him. This year alone I've read ** The Pearl, The Red Pony, ** and ** The Moon is Down, **. The last one has probably been my favorite of the bunch though. Although I doubt anything is going to top * East of Eden, *. Maybe Grapes of Wrath when I finally get to it. Interestingly enough, I loved Oliver Twist as a kid, but I never read any other books by Dickens. Agatha Christie, with Dean Koontz as a close second, and James Herriot in third. Agatha Christie here as well. I have read all her books I came across, and quite possibly several of them twice, because I hardly ever remember who did it. Roald Dahl and Anthony Horowitz. I loved reading their books growing up. Me too. Roald Dahl is a gift to the literary world. I can never outgrow his books. And Anthony Horowitz really got me into the action and spy genre. Honestly, it might still be Enid Blyton, simply because she wrote so much and I read a ton as a kid. I wonder how I'd like the books now. OMG, yes. Haven't thought of them for a while now, but I also had loads of her books when I was a child. By far the favorite author of my childhood. Probably Isaac Asimov, because he wrote so many. But I've read the entire corpus of Robert Heinlein, and he was fairly prolific. All of Neil Stephenson at least once. James Herriot. If you don't know who he is, you need to. Robin Hobb. The Realm of the Elderlings is one of the most engaging series of books that I've ever read. I picked up the first one on a whim even though I wasn't too thrilled by the cover and age of the protagonist. I have never been so happy to be proven wrong. There's so many volumes set in the world, but most are broken up into trilogies and some follow different people in completely different lives and lands. Growing with the protagonist and living through all the changes was such a beautiful fantasy experience for me. I can definitely see myself reading them all again for a third time in a few years. Charles Bukowski. Dan Brown. Historical inaccuracies be damned, his stories are interesting AF. Chuck Palahniuk, and I still have to check the spelling of his name every time I write it. Orson Scott Card. J.R. Tolkien. Jeff Kinney Deadpan Face. Same. Agatha Christie. My mom had almost all of her books and I read them all when I was a kid. I learned the hard way not to read 2 or 3 at the same time. They were similar enough that I would get characters and scenes confused from one book to another. Terry Pratchett I have read almost everything he wrote, and he was a prolific author writing IIRC 41 works set on Discworld alone. Apart from those books he wrote alone, he also collaborated with other authors on several books, notably Neil Gaiman and some Discworld science books, in collaboration with science writers. Stan Lee. Clive Cussler. K.A. Applegate probably with the Animorphs series, if you count Ghost Writers, maybe R.L. Stine as well. 60 plus Animorph books. Used to have every single one on my bookcase. Jim Butcher, he wrote Dresden Files and a few others. Second place is Robert Jordan. If you look at pages it might be Brandon Sanderson though. Polka Never Dies. It's probably a close toss-up between R.L. Stine, K.A. Applegate, Terry Pratchett, or Ross Salvatore. Salman Rushdie or Dave Eggers. I regret to inform you it is J.K. Rowling. I hate her so much. It doesn't have to be. All you have to do is read more. Aaron Hunter. Well, it's a pen name for a group, so do you divide by 4, or? Loved those books as a kid. Top 3 are probably Dean Koontz Jim Butcher Andrew Rowe, or Orson Scott Card, toss up here. Stars and Stones I had to scroll way too far to see Jim Butcher. David Eddings. I think Eddings would be number 2 for me, but I love going back and rereading the Belgarian series, Belgariad and Malloreon, and the Sparkhawk trilogies, lots of nostalgia in those books for me. Paul Theroux, a travel book writer. He is probably my number 2, hard to stop once you start. Probably Harry Turtleduff, or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Dean Koontz. Bernard Cornwell, he writes historical fiction, most of his books are in 2 different series. The Sharp books which primarily follow the Peninsular Campaign of the Napoleonic Wars, and the Saxon, The Last Kingdom series. Cornwell is the best author I've read for battle scenes. He does a great job of describing the big picture flow of the battle, while still maintaining a close-up personal view of the action. Alan Moore. Mercedes Lackey. She's got over 50 and I've read most. Tom Clancy. I've read all the Jack Ryan books he wrote, a few of the other Cold War fiction books he wrote and 2 non-fiction books he co-wrote. Tom Clancy's books are great. Haven't read that many of them though. Anne McCaffrey. R.L. Stine because I probably read 100 Fear Street books in elementary school. But as an adult Jane Austen, J.K. Rowling, Steinbeck, Amy Tan. Haruki Murakami. Nobody compares. Going way back probably Margaret Wise both with and without Tracy Hickman. Baldacci and Stephen King. Clive Cussler. Came here to say this. Probably Edgar Rice Burroughs. Got on a herb kick as a teenager. 24 Tarzan books, 11 Mars books, 7 Pellucidar, 5 Venus, several standalones and others I can't remember. Loved the Venus books most of all. Clive Cussler. Bill Bryson and reaching well back in time James Michener when first was young. Haruki Murakami. Love his stuff. Enid Blyton. Her books were an escape from the world growing up. Loved these books. There was that mysterious tunnel with abyss, a well, inside in one of them, it was so delightfully creepy. Chuck Palahniuk. My dad's favorite author. I was grounded a lot as a teenager so it was usually just easier to grab one of his books for something to do. Damn they were not appropriate for me to read back then. Lol oh well. Elie Wiesel I read 1 book of his I don't read much so for me that's a lot. He's got more, I recommend reading them. Or if you find sitting and reading not for you, Audible has been my best friend this last year. Either Larry Niven, or C.J. Cherryh, both sci-fi writers from the 70s and 80s, for the most part. I have multiple shelves of books from each of them. Lucifer's Hammer is my favorite Larry Niven. Footfall, Niven and Jerry Purnell, too. I kind of wish I'd never read either of them so that I could experience them fresh again. Easily Clive Cussler followed by Stephen King. Can't really remember most of the books I read or what they were about but these 2 were my most read authors. Dr. Seuss. I answered Clive Cussler above thinking only about my books, but really if I think about the books I have purchased, Dr. Seuss might actually be the author I have the most books from, with 2 kids, and a few I own multiple copies. Larry McMurtry. Anne M. Martin with Cassandra Clare close behind. Maureen Johnson gets 3rd place. Rick Riordan, he made Percy Jackson. I scrolled, and now I am here. Roald Dahl. That's at least 28 books I think that he's written and I've read time and time again growing up. As a child, Lemony Snicket. As an adult, I think Augusten Burroughs. I guess I like dark stories, that are age appropriate when I read them. David Gemmell. He's mine too. My comment is lost in here somewhere. I should have read everybody else's before commenting. Clive Barker. Weaveworld is so engrossing and detailed. Talk about creating an entire universe. Clive Barker is a genius and so far beyond my pitiful attempt at writing that he made me want to throw my manuscript out the car window. And I did. I'm not sure, but probably Owen Colfer. I've read all his Artemis Fowl books, as well as a bunch of other side books he's made since then, and the final book of the Hitchhiker series too. So that's at least 12 books, if I'm not misremembering. Rick Riordan. Writers Wattpad. Wonderful people. IDK, but for me it's harder and harder to find really good books. Do you have any tips for good book? I don't mind gender smiley face. Terry Pratchett. Discworld series and the Gnome trilogy. Terry Pratchett. Gaiman. Joe Nesbo. Ed McBain. Probably Piers Anthony, unfortunately. Ha 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 ha. As a teen, Xanth was a lot of fun, and some of his other stuff was interesting. Anthony Horowitz, pronounced Horovitch, and Terry Pratchett. I was going to say Stephen King, but then I remembered how many Goosebumps books I read as a child. So the accurate answer is R.L. Stine. James S. A. Corey, Daniel Abraham and Ty Franck. Sir Terry Pratchett then, Piers Anthony, Harry Harrison, Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov. I like your library. Vonnegut. Henning Mankell. R.L. Stine. Literally the only author I used to read from a lot. Anymore I just have books on skills and spiritualism. Neil Shusterman. Loved the Unwind series and often think about things still existing on another level that we can't see after being gone from ours, like in the Skinjacker books. I scrolled far too long to find this. Sherry S. Tepper. Roald Dahl. Absolutely devoured his books when I was a kid. Favorite was BFG. Tamora Pierce as a child, young teen. Loved her Alana books and the adventures from Tortall. Cassandra Clare and anything she's written about Shadowhunters. Pratchett or Anne McCaffrey, I think. Terry Pratchett. Discworld series and other books by Pratchett followed by GRRM. Not only Asuyev, but also many sci-fi stories. I see a read quite a lot of Polaniac Czech only. Yaroslav Fogler's novels and comic books. Terry Pratchett and Kevin Hearn. Philippa Gregory. Terry Pratchett, hands down. As I have said, whenever someone brings up his stuff, the more I miss that nutbar of a space wizard. Probably Megan Lindholm, aka Robin Hobb. Her Realm of the Elderlings series was 16 books and also probably some of the best word I've ever read. I've also read one additional standalone novel from her, though it felt like I could see the strands of story that she pulls into her other series TL start to take shape there. Terry Pratchett is a close second and will likely beat her in the end. But each one feels so sweet and novel that I'm reluctant to pick them up since there will never be any more. Apparently I lied. I listed out all of Pratchett's work I've read and I'm already at 19 compared to 17 from Hobb. Probably either Terry Pratchett or Douglas Adams' edit. Oh snap, Stephen King. I forgot that hypergraph mutant of a writer has like a million books and I've read a ton of them. Pratchett takes the crown on this one. Aaron Hunter. There are a lot of Warrior Cats books lol. Rick Riordan. He pumps out so many books that it's impossible to avoid them. Jacqueline Wilson. I read a lot more when I was younger, and probably read all of her books out at the time. Isaac Asimov or J.K. Rowling. Probably James Patterson. Lee Child, Mark Billingham, George Pelicanis. Dean Koontz. I love his books, but haven't read one in a couple of years. I just re-listened to From the Corner of His Eye on Audible. Good stuff. Until that I hadn't read any of his books in years either. Robert Jordan, also known as James Oliver Rigney Jr. Did you read his Conan books? They were kind of awesome, and oddly, featured a lot spanking, just like what? John Grisham. And people wonder why I know so much random law. Timothy Zahn. I like this Star Wars books and was disappointed when the Star Wars Extended Universe was canned, knowing that his characters, Mara Jade and Thrawn, would be either thrown away or rehashed into something else. Sad face. Have you seen Star Wars Rebels? Thrawn appears as the big bad in that show in later seasons. I reckon he's amazing in that, but other than his appearance, I have no idea how he compares to old EU Thrawn. Jeff Kinney, Skull and Crossbones. James Patterson, the crime novelist. Probably Victor Pelevin or maybe Vladimir Sorokin. Jack L. Chalker. Brian Greene. Tui. T. Sutherland. Jodi Picoult or Joe Nesbo. Two very different styles. In my late teen early 20s all of Marian Keyes' books. Agatha Christie, Stephen King, and James Patterson. Tui T. Sutherland. She's the author of the Wings of Fire book series and I've read all but one of them. That one just came out so I'm excited. James Patterson, almost all of the Alex Cross series, and Harlan Coben. Charles Bukowski. Stan Lee. Stephen King is up there, a lot of that being the Gunslinger books, but I've read a bunch of his other stuff. Frank Herbert, not just for Dune, he had some pretty fun other stuff. The White Plague, some other sci-fi with some frog people, or something, I forget, it's been 12 years or something. Michael Crichton in there, Sphere being my favorite, as explained elsewhere in this post. Michael Connolly, because I really enjoyed Bosch the show, so I decided to pick up some of his novels, which really helped out at the beginning of this pandemic when my mom was out of work and ran out of books to read, so she came to me for what I got.
Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.